Hello and welcome to my video where I'm going to show you how to knit a lacy scalloped edge as you bind off. This particular wavy edge is created by casting on a lot of stitches on a single row and then binding them all off on the next row. This is a bind off pattern, so of course you'll be adding this to the end of your knitted project. As you can see, I've already knit a few rows of garter stitch and these represent the end of my knitted project. Just make sure that before you follow this pattern, you have a multiple of 3 stitches plus 1 on your needle. I'm personally using DK weight yarn, but of course you can use any weight of yarn, and I have 19 stitches on my needle. These 19 stitches are going to become 5 scallops by the end. Okay, so let's begin. This pattern only really has one row, and you need to begin by knitting 3 stitches. You then need to bind off 1 stitch. To do this, use your left hand needle to pick up the second stitch down on the right hand needle, take it over the stitch above and drop it off the end of the needle. We've now reached the repeating section of this row. We're going to be casting on 7 stitches using the backwards loop method, so pull the stitches down your needles to make a bit of space. Then pinch your working yarn like so and twist it clockwise to make a loop. Place this loop on your left hand needle and you've now created a new stitch. You just need to do this 6 more times. So pinch the yarn, twist clockwise and place the loop on the left hand needle. Pinch, twist and place the loop on the needle. And just repeat this until you've cast on 7 stitches in total. You then need to slip 7 stitches purlwise, and you alternate between slipping a stitch purlwise with the yarn in back and slipping a stitch purlwise with the yarn in front. So make sure the working yarn is at the back, then take your right hand needle down through the next stitch as if to purl, but instead of purling it you just slip it off the end of the needle. You then bring the working yarn to the front and do the same thing. So take your right hand needle down through the next stitch as if to purl, and then just slip it off the end of the needle. And you'll just keep repeating this until you've slipped all of those cast on stitches. So take the working yarn to the back and slip a stitch, bring the working yarn to the front and slip a stitch, to the back and slip 1, to the front and slip 1, and finally take the working yarn to the back and slip the final stitch. You then need to repeat knit 1, bind off 1 3 times. So knit a stitch and then bind off. Knit a stitch and bind off. Knit a stitch and bind off. You then just repeat this section, starting with casting on 7 until you've only got 1 stitch left. So first push your stitches down the needle and cast on 7 stitches. Then slip each of these 7 stitches as follows. Slip 1 purlwise with the yarn in back, slip 1 purlwise with the yarn in front, slip 1 with the yarn in back, slip 1 with the yarn in front, with the yarn in back, with the yarn in front, and then with the yarn in back. Then repeat knit 1, bind off 1 3 times. So knit a stitch and bind off. Knit a stitch, bind off. Knit a stitch and bind off. And then repeat that again. So cast on 7 stitches. Slip 7 stitches purlwise. And then knit 1, bind off 1 3 times. And just keep repeating this section until you've only got one stitch left. And once you do only have one stitch left, you knit one. And then all you have to do is bind off all of these stitches. I'm just going to use the traditional bind off method, so I'm going to knit 2 and bind off 1. Then repeat knit 1, bind off 1 until the end of the row. So that's knit 1, bind off 1, knit 1, bind off 1, knit 1, bind off 1, and so on. Once you've bound off all the stitches, cut your working yarn to leave you with at least 6 inches. Then take this yarn tail through the last stitch and tighten. And to finish, you just need to weave these yarn tails into the back of the knitting. And that's it, that's how you make this scalloped edge. It's got quite a sturdy bound off edge, but also a nice lacy effect. I really hope you found this tutorial useful, and thank you very much for watching.